The UFC is back, ladies and gentlemen, as Dana White just went live earlier and dropped some massive fight news as he gave us the lineup for International Fight Week, UFC 317. It will be headlined by Ilia Topuria moving up to the lightweight division to take on Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title. So obviously that means Islam Makhachev has vacated the title. So we'll discuss that. We'll discuss the lineup because they dropped the lineup for us. And overall, I actually don't think that it's a good card at all for International Fight Week. I think that it gets saved by the main and co-main event. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then they announced for UFC 319 in Chirac, man, they have Khamzat Chimaev finally getting his title opportunity against Dricus du Plessis, and what I have labeled this line exactly, I have kept it this exact same time, and that is, or this whole time, and that is that fight will be batshit crazy. Dricus du Plessis, Khamzat Chimaev, the judges will not be needed. That fight will not go to the judges' scorecards. You can mark my words on that. And then Dana also, he was asked on the live stream for basically an update for John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. We will discuss what he had to say in this video because it actually sounds like that fight might be getting done. So despite all the BS that we've heard, that sounds like that's something that could be done. And then, Islam Makhachev, he will be moving up to 170 pounds to take on Jack Della Madalena to try to earn another title in a different division. So obviously he vacated the title. I have some thoughts on that. So we're going to discuss all of it in this video. We have a lot to unpack, man. And then also, for some reason, the boxing match between Canelo and Bud Crawford now sounds like it is actually going to be on September 13th, rivaling UFC Noche UFC. So some strange things going on, some big announcements, but also some things that I'm not a huge fan of. So we're going to discuss all of it in this video, man. Let's hop into it straight away with the bout list that we have right here for International Fight Week. Main event, Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. Listen, I was up here saying for the longest time, I wanted Ilia versus Islam because I'd been saying, look, man, that is probably the biggest fight in the sport outside of Jones versus Aspinall. Stylistically, it's super intriguing, and you just knew that Islam versus Topuria, I mean, it was going to have the fun build-up. It was going to have the fun style clash, and if Islam was able to beat Ilia, he could be the first guy to take his O. Well, I sat up here and said, heading into UFC 315, when we found out at the presser that, look, if Barriault were to win, we would get Islam versus Ilia. But if JDM won, Islam would be moving up to try to become the welterweight champion, to where we would get Charles Oliveira versus Ilia. And I sat up here and said, no matter what happens, of course, the Ilia versus Islam fight is what I think is probably the biggest and best fight the organization could put together. But JDM versus Islam, unbelievably good fight. Oliveira versus Ilia, you could even argue that in terms of the excitement factor when they get in there and throw down, that could be one of the craziest scraps that we have seen of the year. That is a fight that I just see absolute carnage. That's going to be a complete train wreck when Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira clash in the octagon. Super excited for that. And then Alexandre Pantoja defending his title against Kai Kara France. And, people, I'm getting sick and tired of the Pantoja disrespect. I know he's a little fella and he doesn't really talk a lot of shit and all this and that. Maybe I need to start talking some shit for Alexandre, man, because this dude it's not even a debate anymore. He is the most disrespected champion and the most disrespected fighter in UFC history. Without question, this man is ranked number 10 once again in the pound for pound list after I think Dana said, what has he been undefeated for 5 years? He's basically cleaned out the division. We're running rematches, recycled rematches for Pantoja, and this guy can't get a little respect around here. We got guys who aren't even champions higher ranked than this dude because he's a damn flyweight. I don't give a damn. Pantoja is one of the best fighters in the organization, and he's going in there against Kai Kara France, who, listen, man, Kai Kara, he's a hard matchup. He's a hard matchup when you look at the active flyweights on the roster. Look, you all know by now that I believe the guy that can beat Pantoja and solve that riddle would be Muhammad Makhachev, but he's not in the organization at this time. And when you look around the weight class, it's recycled rematches. We don't have a ton of contenders for Pantoja, but he has another rematch on his hands with Kai Kara here. And Kara France, he's got outstanding takedown defense. He's got legit power in his hands. We saw that in his last fight against Steve Erceg. He is a threat to Alexandre Pantoja. Now, I'm going to give my early predictions for these fights, but let's take a look at the rest of the fights here. We have Paulo Costa making his return after coming off of a loss to Robert Whittaker and Sean Strickland. While the Whittaker fight was a very entertaining fight, goes out there, puts on a snoozer, because again, people were very hard on Strickland for that fight at UFC 302. Takes two to tango. Paulo Costa looks like he lost his sauce a little bit, man. He's afraid to move forward and throw down. He's trying to stick and move and be this pretty style point fighter on the outside. And I sat up here and said, I got to slow down, man. I'm so excited, man. I got to slow the hell down. But listen, Paulo Costa's changed his fighting style, and I think it's for the worse. Like, I think he looks more like flowy out there. It's a little more flashy, but I think he's got to get back to his roots because he's going in there against a very fun striker opposite of him in Roman Kopylov, who is coming off of a huge win over Chris Curtis, where he was able to finish Curtis. And yeah, it was a controversial stoppage, but he was still putting on a very, very good performance. And look, this is a big fight here. Paulo Costa, he needs a win. He does not have a win over a current UFC middleweight. That is absolutely insane. And this dude is somehow still in the rankings. The rankings make absolutely no sense. The rankings are broken. They're bullshit. Obviously, this proves that Paulo Costa should not be ranked. But at the end of the day, he's a name. He's fun to watch. He's got a fun style. He's built like a brick shithouse. So we get to hear Joe Rogan go, do you see how Paulo Costa's built, man? I mean, his abs. He's got abs on abs, and oh, what a man. We get to hear Joe Rogan be suspect as shit when he's talking about Costa. And then we have a very, very good striker opposite of him in Roman Kopylov. This fight is going to be fireworks, a potential fight of the night candidate right here. I like the matchup. I lean at this particular moment towards Roman Kopylov because I just don't like what we've seen from Costa, man. He's not the same guy that walked down Yoel Romero, dog. Whoa! He walked down Yoel Romero, man. He moved forward. He wasn't afraid of Yoel, got in his face, and ooh. You know, Paulo Costa's lost his sauce, man. He's not the same guy. He's pulling out of fights, an injury here, fighting once a year. That's how I know it's basically been a year. Every time we get a Paulo Costa fight, I'm like, oh, if I look at the calendar, it must have been a year, right? That's how I do. I go up my calendar off of when Paulo Costa fights because I know that it has been a year's time. Now, he did fight Robert Whittaker at 298. That came around, and I think that was 298, and then ended up fighting Strickland at 302. So that was the quickest turnaround of his career. But now again, we get a long layoff, and he's going in there against a very fun, dangerous striker in Roman Kopylov. I think it's going to be a fun back and forth that goes the distance, but I think Kopylov is able to outland him and add a big name like Costa to his resume. But make no mistake about it, Costa is always fun to watch other than the Strickland fight. But again, we know how Strickland fights, doesn't open up. And if you don't come after him, it's going to be a boring fight. So that was kind of a disaster in hindsight. Costa's new style, you know, and then Strickland just being a jab and teep fest the whole time. So look, it's a fun fight. It's a fun fight. Kopylov's going to go after him. He's an aggressive style striker. He's very, very fun. He's very technical. Southpaw versus Orthodox matchup. Both got good kicks. Sign me up. Love the matchup. Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. This was supposed to happen back at UFC 311 till Arman, his back got hurt. And then I'm just messing around, man. I wanted that fight so bad. I'm still pissed at Arman for it. And listen, I can probably pull back the hate a little bit because Dana White and the UFC, they're going to make him pay for it. We all know that at this point because it should really be Arman fighting Ilia for the vacant title. I mean, Arman Tsarukyan beat Charles Oliveira. I mean, he's been on an absolute tear, so he definitely has earned the title opportunity. But come on, man. We all knew when he pulled out of that fight that Dana and the UFC were going to hold it against him because that's what they do. They got that petty type of swag when it comes to that kind of stuff. But listen, Dariush versus Moicano, this was supposed to take place at UFC 311. I actually think that this is a very, very intriguing matchup because Renato, outside of the loss to Islam Makhachev, which again, him and Islam were not preparing for each other. That's a awful fight for Renato Moicano. He had zero chance in there against Islam, and people were up there like, oh, Moicano's got a chance, man. He's got a chance. He had zero chance against Islam Makhachev. And if you watch my video, the last minute breakdown that I did when that, they had the opponent change, I told you that Makhachev was going to absolutely butcher Moicano. It was a free fight, basically. But again, it's not Islam's fault, right? People are going to try to hold that that against him? No, he still showed up and competed. And it's not his fault that Arman pulled out. So again, Moicano was chopped liver heading in there against Islam Makhachev. And now he gets a matchup with Beneil Dariush. And Benny is a very game opponent, man. He's got a big left hand, big ooga booga left hand. And outside of that, he's not very dangerous on the feet. But what he does have is very good grappling, because don't you remember at one point we were all sitting around, whoa, man, Beneil Dariush, got to watch out. He's got that big old left hand, and, you know, he might be a problem for some of the grapplers at the top of the, you know, division. And people were out there, man. Listen, there were people out there and they were like, oh, Dariush, he might be the kryptonite of Islam. You remember those conversations? Like, and just like McGregor said, Beneil Dariush. Like, I like Beneil Dariush, man, but he's on the decline. He's on the decline. He's been getting brutally finished by Arman Sarukian and Charles Oliveira. Look, those are the top of the heap, though. But he's been inactive. He was supposed to fight Moicano. Didn't happen. Now he gets the rematch. Number 9 versus number 10. Like this matchup. The first time around, I was leaning towards Moicano. And at this particular time, I am leaning towards Moicano again. But I could see Dariush winning this fight, because on the feet, I don't think Moicano has a power advantage over Dariush. I think he's actually a more technical striker and has more to offer on the feet, does Moicano. But I think Dariush has the power, and if you're just going to go out there and try to have basically a flow grappling jiu-jitsu competition with Dariush, that is going to be hard to beat him that way. But I think Moicano has made some good improvements in the grappling. I think he's got more in terms of the striking on the feet and the volume on his side to where he could outscore Dariush and win a decision. Maybe he finds a ground and pound finish. We saw against BSD the way that Moicano just butchered him. So I think that that's a very competitive scrap there. And then, Denise versus Tafa. I think Denise probably KOs Justin Tafa. But either way, I think we see a KO in that fight. Brandon Royval versus Manel Kape. Massive stakes in the flyweight division, because if Manel Kape can go out there and beat the number 1 ranked flyweight in Brandon Royval, I could see Kape working his way into a title opportunity. Because listen, man, we saw at UFC Tampa before the close of last year where Kape went in there and hit flow state. And when that happened, he looked like one of the best fighters we've ever seen when he went out there and was absolutely styling. So again, this is a step up in competition here against Brandon Royval. It feels like Kape has been kind of, he's been pulling out of fights. It's just been this inconsistent, unreliable career since he's been in the UFC. But if he can put it together, get in there against Brandon Royval, actually make it to the dance, I think he could go out there and possibly outscore Brandon Royval. But either way, this is going to be a fun, kickboxing fight inside the octagon here. Early thoughts, man. I honestly think that Brandon Royval might be able to edge it over Manel Kape. I think it's going to take a vintage Manel Kape performance to go out there and beat Brandon, because a lot of people underrate Royval, man. They forget how good this guy is. Remember when Tatsuro Taira, he was on an absolute tear, and it was like, look, this is going to be an issue for Royval. Not at all. Royval is scrambly. He's wiry. He's fast on the feet. He's very, very well-rounded. I don't know if Kape gets through him, man. But either way, I think it's a good fight. And right now I'm leaning towards Royval. But again, stay tuned for my official prediction on that, because that is a great matchup right there. Jack Hermansson, Gregory Rodriguez. If this was 5 rounds, I could very easily see Jack Hermansson stealing this fight and making it look like the Joe Pyfer fight. But the problem is, yes, RoboCop just got fraud checked by Jared Cannonier, which, yeah, we could have seen that coming, given that, yeah, Gregory has the power to knock anybody out. But if he can't get that KO, he's going to gas out and it's going to be a disaster. So I think that if he hits Jack Hermansson, I don't know that Jack has the chin and the durability at this point in his career to be able to survive the onslaught that Gregory is going to provide. However, if Jack does survive a, horrible first round where he's going to get battered around, dropped, where it's going to look like he's about to get KO'd, if he can survive that, I think that Gregory gets tired. I think that RoboCop should be at light heavyweight. I just don't think at middleweight that it's something with his gas. I don't know if he's cutting too much weight. He's carrying around too much mass. He has zero gas tank. And I think if Jack can pick and poke at him from the outside, maybe make him grapple a little bit. I know Robo has very, very good jiu-jitsu. Blow those arms up, blow the shoulders up, make that guy fatigue. And if you could drag it out past the first round, I actually think Jack Hermansson could pull this fight off, man. I know that sounds crazy, but after what we just saw against Cannonier, the blueprint's out there. But again, you're probably going to take an ass whooping in the first round. So if Jack can avoid that, I think he gives himself a chance. But early thoughts, I'm going to lean towards RoboCop, because I don't think that Hermansson is going to be able to weather the storm like Jared Cannonier did. And then we have Araujo versus Tracy Cortez. Who gives a shit? At the end of the day, who cares? I don't care about that fight. Decent fight because we got number 8 versus number 10, but I don't care. The rest of the fights, pretty solid, pretty good fights on here. But let's get into the main event, man. Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. Like I said, I mean, listen, I wanted Topuria versus Islam Makhachev because it checks all the boxes in terms of being a mega fight and all those kinds of things. In terms of the collision that we are going to see in this fight, this may be a more fun matchup, whereas Islam versus Ilia is the more intriguing matchup that has all the stakes on it, to where this, I just think that this is going to be straight carnage, man. This is going to be an absolute train wreck when these guys collide, because with Ilia Topuria, I've been up here saying, I've been glazing the shit out of Topuria, man. I'll just be real. If people want to get on me for it, I'm just going to own that shit, man. I have been glazing Ilia Topuria for a long time. Ever since he came over to the UFC, I've been saying this is the next big thing. He has the best boxing in the UFC, the best boxing fundamentals. Everything comes from where it's supposed to. He looks like a pro boxer. And not to mention, he has a very sneaky and underrated calf kick that has been a very important piece of him winning those fights against Alexander Volkanovski and getting that finish victory over Max Holloway, because that's what he did to those guys, right? Yeah, it was the boxing that eventually got him out of there and the thunderous power in his hands and cutting the cage off and all those types of things. But he utilized that calf kick to hinder the movement of Volkanovski, make him a stationary target to where he can't use that speed and footwork. And then he did the exact same thing to Max Holloway, to where Charles Oliveira, he's not going to let that happen. Charles Oliveira, we all know, has that beautiful, aggressive Muay Thai style, that high guard. He checks kicks very well. He, gets that leg out of the way. We saw him do a tremendous job of that against Justin Gaethje, to where he would just time it, raise his leg. Gaethje would be completely out of position. Oliveira would step in, land his knees, that nasty right hand, to where he was eventually able to drop Justin Gaethje, sub him, and get him out of there, to where I think that that is a possibility for Charles in this fight, considering that Ilia is the shorter guy. And like I've said, everyone's like, Ilia's so small, bro. Ilia's so small. Yeah, he's short, but in terms of his stature, he's a big dude, man. And now you're getting to see that as he's filling out for 155 pounds. He's short, but he's not a small dude, man. He's a pretty stout individual. And I'm telling you right now, these idiots out there saying, the power ain't going to translate to lightweight, man. The power ain't going to translate to lightweight. Have you not seen when he fought Jai Herbert at 155 pounds? His most brutal KO of his entire career arguably was against Jai Herbert at 155 pounds. A tall, lean, rangy striker who people disrespect Jai Herbert all the time. I know he's not a world champion or an elite fighter, but in terms of the striking, he's pretty good, right? And that he showed the blueprint to where if you can time when Ilia tries to throw that big overhand right, if you can time a snappy little head kick in there, then you can drop this guy. Well, if it was so easy, Volkanovski and Holloway, they all tried to do it. No one could do it, because now Ilia Topuria has found the answer to not being dropped. And that is literally, I think, the only way to hurt Ilia Topuria, to sneak that head kick in there, land a knee, because he's going to be a little bit shorter than Charles. And when he's moving his head, trying to box and get to the inside, that could be the time that Oliveira throws a flying knee, throws a knee up the middle or something like that. But listen, Ilia Topuria has an underrated ground game. People dismiss his grappling skills before the UFC. Go back and watch his fights, man. He's got really good wrestling. He has very, very good submission skills. That is how he was basically winning all of his fights before getting to the UFC. And if he has to use it, you saw it against Yusuf Salau. You saw when he was able to take him down. You saw he was able to control him. But the bottom line is this. I don't think this fight hits the floor, because if it does, we've seen Charles Oliveira improve his wrestling. We saw that in his last outing against Michael Chandler, to where he was basically putting on an absolute masterclass until the final couple minutes, to where things started to get dicey. But that is exactly my point with Charles Oliveira. In every big fight that he has had at lightweight, Michael Chandler, he almost got finished by Chandler, almost got knocked out by Dustin Poirier, almost got knocked out by Justin Gaethje, got dropped by Islam Makhachev. If you are getting dropped by those dudes, what happens when you get hit by the best boxer and the most powerful pound for pound? And I believe, I know he's shorter, when this guy lands, man, he has the most devastating power in the boxing in the sport. Ilia Topuria, when he lands on Charles Oliveira, he is going to shut his lights out. Mark my words. Ilia Topuria by brutal KO. He will starch Charles Oliveira, become the lightweight champion, and then if Islam wins the welterweight title, maybe we see him come back to lightweight and fight Ilia Topuria. Maybe we get that fight. This is a nightmare for Charles Oliveira. Ilia Topuria is dangerous. He is devastating. And like I said, that calf kick's been very important for Ilia against his top competition. It was important against Volk. It was important against Holloway. Oliveira will have an answer for that. And Charles will not be afraid to go after him. But if you're getting dropped by all of those guys, when you get hit by Ilia Topuria, he is going to shut your lights out. And people are like, Jake, you keep saying all this about Topuria. He couldn't, how's he going to do it lightweight? In my opinion, he beats everybody outside of maybe Islam Makhachev. I think Islam had the answer to beat Ilia Topuria. And the only other arguments would be Arman or Charles Oliveira. So yeah, we get to see one of these matchups here. But Justin Gaethje, give me a break. Ilia Topuria would brutally flatline Justin Gaethje. You saw what Max Holloway did. Imagine if that's Ilia. Good, clean power puncher on the inside. Dude's as dangerous as it gets. People are just hating on Topuria because they're fans of Oliveira, they're fans of whoever, and they just want to discredit this guy. The guy's good for the sport. He's, he talks a big game, doesn't cross the lines from what we've seen so far, which I like. He's going to build it up. He's got a fun style. He's undefeated. There's a lot on the line here. I think Ilia Topuria ends Charles Oliveira at International Fight Week. Moving on. Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. Look, man, this is a great fight. Listen, Alexandre Pantoja, like I said, most disrespected fighter in UFC history. I mean, in terms of champions, for sure. In terms of overall fighters, I think he's the most disrespected fighter of all time at this point. He should be arguably in the top 5 pound for pound right now. The amount of title defenses, the resume that this guy has, you could argue that he's the greatest flyweight of all time, resume-wise. I know Demetrius Johnson's looked at as like the GOAT flyweight. We got Cejudo. We got some other names in there. Enter Pantoja's name into that conversation. His resume is amazing, beating Brandon Royval, beating Brandon Moreno, Steve Erceg. He has a win over Kara France, all these different things. Pantoja is a serious problem. And if you are going to beat Alexandre, I am convinced it's like if you go in there against Marab. You're going to have to finish this guy. I don't believe that there's anybody in the division right now that could go out there and outscore and win a decision over Pantoja. I just don't see it happening. I think that Kai Kara France has good takedown defense. His striking is very, very clean. His boxing, out of all the city kickboxing guys, is the best. And I think that there's a chance that he can stuff the takedowns early at Pantoja. But we know how Pantoja is, man. He brings you into this gritty war to where he mixes in the grappling, threatens with chokes, mixes it up on the feet and is not afraid of a scrap, and he is super durable. So in terms of this fight, I think that there's a chance that Kai Kara France can go out there and stop Pantoja and pull this one off. However, from what I've seen so far, the disrespect that is constantly being thrown towards Alexandre Pantoja's way, I cannot help but root for the guy. And not only that, I think he has an unbelievably well-rounded skill set. He has cardio, he has wrestling, jiu-jitsu, serviceable enough striking, has power if you overlook it. He is the complete package backed by grit and heart. Give me Alexandre Pantoja to get this one done against Kai Kara France. I can see him actually finding a submission here. I think Kara France maybe hurts him at one point in the fight, but then Pantoja goes to the grappling and then is able to take the back, lock in a rear naked choke, and get a submission. But either way, this is a very fun fight in the flyweight division because we know every single time Kara France is going to go out there and look for the knockout. Great fight right here at flyweight. Then this one right here, man, going down in Chirac in Chicago. Your boy might have to pull up, man, to this, and that is finally my favorite fighter in the UFC. I'm biased, man. Come on. Khamzat Chimaev getting his title opportunity against Dricus du Plessis. I've talked about this fight a lot on my channel, so if you're looking for more in-depth breakdowns, I got those all over the place. The tagline for this fight has always been for me, bat shit crazy. 3 words, that's all you need. The judges, they can take the night off for the main event. They're not going to be needed because this fight ain't seeing the scorecards. This is either Khamzat Chimaev getting Dricus du Plessis out of there in the first 2 rounds, and if he cannot do that, he is getting knocked out and finished by Dricus du Plessis. That is why I wanted this fight. People are like, oh, I want Strickland to beat DDP so we get this Khamzat versus Strickland fight. Why? Why? Sean Strickland, he would get destroyed by Chimaev. Strickland stands straight up in the air. Chimaev would take him down, take his back, and sub him in a round. He'd probably do Strickland way worse than what he did Whitaker. Oh, because Strickland was engagement farming and saying a bunch of, crazy shit about Chimaev and this and that to try to work himself into a fight. He knew he was. Strickland might have went out there and lost the fight to DDP just so he didn't have to face Khamzat. You know what I mean? To get beaten that bad by DDP. But no, man, listen, DDP's super, super skilled. I'm a big fan of Dricus du Plessis. He's been a great champion. He's going out there beating everybody. He's beat Adesanya. He's beat Strickland twice. He beat Robert Whitaker. He has been undefeated inside the UFC. I have nothing but respect for Dricus du Plessis. I am a fan of his. But come on, man. I got my bias, man. I'm a big fan of Chimaev. That's my guy, dude. Khamzat Chimaev is my guy, and I believe that he gets this done. I believe that Khamzat Chimaev goes out there and he finds a submission over Dricus du Plessis within the first 2 rounds. Look, I don't think he's going to make it look as easy as what Chimaev did to Robert Whitaker. However, I just can't get the bad grappling exchanges from DDP out of my head when he fought Derek Brunson. And I know that was a little while ago. What was that, UFC 285 or something? That wasn't all that long ago. He looked like a fish out of water at times when Brunson was taking him down. He got flattened out by Brunson. Brunson was in full mount. He took his back, I think, at some points. I'll have to go back and watch that to refresh my memory. There were some bad positions. And if that's Khamzat Chimaev, you're getting submitted. You're getting submitted. And then people sleep on the striking of Chimaev. They forget that he has devastating power in that right hand. The way that he was able to brutally starch Gerald Meerschaert to where if you're so reactive and worried about the takedowns, here comes that right hand and it can knock you out. But here's the bottom line, man. I'm as real as it gets about this fight. I'm rooting for Khamzat. That's my guy. I'm a big fan of DDP. Listen, I wanted this fight because Strickland was the easy way to the title for Khamzat Chimaev. Beating DDP, that is, in my opinion, one of the hardest, if not the hardest matchup for Khamzat at 185 pounds. It would mean that much more to go out there and beat Dricus. I believe that Dricus is maybe the more well-rounded fighter. I believe on the feet, again, we've seen Khamzat get into some back and forths with Gilbert Burns, with Kamaru Usman. He cannot do that with Dricus du Plessis. Dricus is a far better striker than those guys. He is much more polished on the feet. And again, he is a real 185er, which is what is super intriguing to me about this fight. We haven't seen Khamzat in there go back and forth with a real 185er. I know he went out there and steamrolled Whitaker, but we didn't really get to see much, which again, credit to Chimaev going in there and just getting it done. But I'm telling you right now, if Chimaev does not get Dricus du Plessis out of there in the first couple rounds, I think he gets finished by Dricus du Plessis because as the fight plays out, we know DDP's got a gas tank. We know his power carries. We know he's super well-rounded. He has all the championship experience, multiple 5-rounders on his side. I think Khamzat Chimaev gets it done, though. I think that he has Olympic-level wrestling, his jiu-jitsu skills, working with his coach, Allen. I can't remember his last name. I think he grappled with Gilbert Burns back in the day. He is an absolute savage when it comes to the jiu-jitsu game. I think Khamzat is just an elite specialist when it comes to the grappling. I think it's going to be too much for Dricus du Plessis. And again, the speed and the technicalities that Khamzat brings to the 185-pound division, I don't think anybody will have the answer for it. And if anyone does, though, I could see it being a guy like Dricus du Plessis. Either way, this fight will not see the judges' scorecards. Either Chimaev by finish in the first couple or Dricus du Plessis will get the finish as we get into the championship rounds. I think my guy Khamzat gets it done, though. But either way, going to be an amazing fight. Super glad that this one finally is on the books. Okay, so the news that kind of flew under the radar a little bit because of all the fight announcements that has a lot of people up in arms and has people frustrated like, whoa, man, they made Makhachev vacate. Why would they do that? The disrespect and all these different things. And I'm with you. I don't like the fact that the UFC forced Islam Makhachev to vacate, right? Because obviously we don't know for sure if he was forced to vacate, but some of the rumors that we were hearing with Ilia Topuria when he was going to move up to 155 pounds was the fact that he was basically forced to vacate the title, right? We heard some rumors about that. And it sounds to me like the UFC is no longer going to allow the double champ opportunities. And again, that kind of stings, because if anybody deserves to move up, have the strap on their shoulder to try to, at the end of the night, have both straps around their shoulder, there is nobody more deserving in the sport at present than Islam Makhachev. He has multiple title defenses. I believe that he has 4. In my opinion, he is the most well-rounded fighter in the sport. He is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, the greatest lightweight of all time. And like I said, over the next couple fights here, if he wins them, I could see him being the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. And listen, man, it just stings the fact that he's not going to be able to go up, have that belt with them, being the current lightweight champion, being able to possibly beat JDM and be a double champ. However, I think that this is a business tactic from the UFC that they're going to use moving forward. And again, if this was them doing this out of the blue to Islam, I would be even more pissed off than I am right now. But I think that this is the new business model moving forward. I don't think that the UFC is going to allow double champ opportunities moving forward. At least they better not, right? Because if you're not going to allow Islam to do it, then nobody else is going to be deserving of it, right? So them doing this, that kills the double champ thing moving forward, in my opinion. But listen, I think the UFC is doing that because 2 things. They don't want divisions being held up. That's number 1. And I think that for business, it affects things, right? Because you have a guy, yeah, it's amazing if they're the champion in 2 divisions, but it slows things down. You have to defend your lightweight title. You have to defend your welterweight title. And then again, so Islam's liable to win the 170-pound belt, be like, I felt great at 170. I'm not going back to 55. And then again, you put an interim belt on the line that basically meant nothing, because he's not even going to go back and defend at 155. Now, I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I think the UFC, I'm trying to explain why I think the UFC is getting away from double champ opportunities. Now, having said all of this, you all know I'm a massive Islam Makhachev fan, one of my favorite fighters of all time. And listen, if you're going to move up to 170 pounds, I obviously wish he could have just held on to the belt, had that visual, had that representation of becoming the double champ to be able to have that label. But I still think the label carries, man. And you got to see what happens, in my opinion, when you dedicate a move to go up a weight class with the proper preparation, right? We saw Volk do it the first time against Islam. Then he came back and beat Yair in the featherweight division. But we've seen, then he went up and fought Islam on short notice, came back, got starched by Ilia. We saw Max move up, look great at lightweight, filled out to his frame, put on a masterclass, starched Gaethje, came back to 45, and got starched by Ilia Topuria. I am not an advocate for these fighters bulking up, dedicating this whole, body transformation basically to move up a weight class, then come back down and try to cut and shave off the mass that you just put on and bounce in between weight classes. It all sounds great, believe me. And if anyone could do it, it would be Islam. I just don't like that idea. One, from the health perspective, because again, he's a guy that cuts a lot of weight. We already know that. And when you're bouncing around weight classes, you're adding on size, you're dropping the size, you're adding the size. To me, you're not giving, that's hard on your body. It's hard on your body. So maybe those were some things that factored in. But I believe that Islam Makhachev, no matter what, in my eyes, this is a double champ opportunity, regardless of if he is the lightweight champion right now. Because at the end of the day, he vacated to move up. So again, was it his decision? Was it the UFC's decision? This sounds like something that they figured out when Hunter Campbell flew over to Dagestan to figure this out. But either way, he's going to be moving on to fight Jack Della Madalena. Now, it sounds like we heard JDM on Ariel's show saying, look, man, I want to get back in there in the early fall. It sounds like, is when he would like to return in Perth, Australia. We saw Islam head to Perth to take on Alexander Volkanovski. Islam won the belt against Oliveira. Khabib went in there and was like, Volkanovski. They were like, we want to fight you in your backyard in Australia. They went there and beat Volkanovski. I can see them heading to Australia again because, again, JDM's the champ now. So he should be able to defend his title in his hometown, right? Or where the fans are going to be rooting for him and have that home field advantage. I believe that is fair for JDM. This is a massive fight right here because one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest in the sport right now, is Islam Makhachev. I think people tend to forget how big of a star this guy is. And if you're going to talk about anyone moving up a weight class and going in there against a dangerous striker, a guy that we just saw put on a great performance against Bilal Muhammad, I believe that Islam could be the guy to have the answer for JDM. But I'm going to be real, man. If he cannot get the takedowns early and find a way to submit JDM and get him out of there, or land a shot on the feet to rock him, and then that leads to a submission, I think Islam could be in some serious trouble against Jack, man. I'm just being honest. Listen, if you're getting into these barn burners with Volkanovski the first time, and I know the circumstances heading into that fight, he wasn't, feeling his best coming into that, the rehydration stuff, and then he's going out there and having a war with Dustin Poirier, right? If those things are happening and you're doing that against a true welterweight and JDM with some of the best boxing in the sport, I would like to think that that is going to be an absolute nightmare. Either way, I think Islam will fill out very well at 170 pounds. He's already a big guy. He already has a super well-rounded skill set. That's the beauty of Islam. He can grapple. He can submit guys. He can knock people out on the feet. He can outstrike you on the feet. I believe that the improvements in the striking are going to serve Islam well in this fight. So early thoughts, I believe that Islam is able to take down Jack Della Madalena and ultimately find a submission within the first couple rounds. But again, we've seen JDM, man. We saw against Barriault how good his takedown defense was. But again, Muhammad didn't start shooting takedowns till late in the fight, which was an absolute mistake. But a lot of that, the footwork, the improvements, and again, working with the, grappling wizard that is Craig Jones. He seems to be the grappling whisperer that helps these guys go in there against these dangerous submission aces like an Islam Makhachev. Going to be very curious to see how this one plays out. Super dangerous fight for Islam. Super dangerous fight for Jack Della. Massive fight. Love it. I'm early prediction. I think Islam can get it done by submission. But the longer it plays out, I could see Jack starting to take over with that excellent boxing that he has. Okay, couple more things here. We got two more. We got the boxing announcement, and then this right here. A fan asked Dana White on the live, basically, what's going on with John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, and he said, we'll get Aspinall versus Jones done. The heavyweight fight will happen. Just relax. I'll announce that soon. Well, it seems like Dana White is super confident about this. I mean, he has been persistent about this fight is happening. It's happening, it's happening, it's happening. And I don't think I've ever seen or heard Dana so adamant that a fight that seems like it's not going to happen is going to happen. So to me, that is a good sign. Obviously, until we hear from Dana in the UFC that it's official, it's one of those things, I need to see it before I believe it, because I've been up here saying I have my doubts that this fight happens. 40% I think it happens, 60% I think it doesn't happen, because we hear John Jones out there, he's playing right into this. I mean, hell, his profile picture is a duck with a belt. I mean, he's playing into the whole ducking narrative. I think he's trying to create buzz, frustrate people, all those kinds of things, play this massive troll job. But at the end of the day, it sounds like that this fight can happen. And if it's going to happen, it is going to be the biggest heavyweight fight of all time, at least one of them. And not only that, one of the biggest fights in the sport without question. Sounds like Dana and the UFC are cooking, man. Sounds like they could get this one done. I hope that they can, because there's no question that is a massive fight. But again, if we could get it booked, move the hell on. I want to see Aspinall back in there. We're wasting his prime. Last but not least, Turki Al-Sheikh has decided that the Canelo-Crawford fight will take place on September 13th, the same date as UFC Noche. Dana White will be promoting both of these events. Look, I sat up here when we heard that Dana was going to be the promoter for Bud Crawford versus Canelo. And look, I know Dana White's been a boxing fan his whole life. He takes his shots like, fuck Bob Arum, fuck, Oscar De La Hoya is a weirdo, and all these different things, right? And it's been fun hearing that. But we all know Dana's a big boxing fan at the end of the day, right? He likes taking shots at those guys and all those kinds of things. But to me, this is just one of those things. Obviously, Turkey's putting this thing on, and him and Dana have a good relationship. But I also think that part of this is Dana just wants to be like, aha, look at what I could do. I'm the greatest promoter of all time. I'm going to come into the boxing world. I'm going to put on this super fight that couldn't get done. And Turkey and I are going to go in there and get this thing done. And listen, I'm all aboard for this. I think Canelo versus Bud Crawford, that's a massive fight. That's one of the greatest boxing fights basically of all time, stylistically. I mean, this is a massive fight here, at least of the modern era, right? I'm all for this. And if there's anybody that should be headlining on Mexican independence, it's in all of combat sports, that is Saul Canelo Alvarez. Without question, Canelo Alvarez is the main guy that could be headlining for that. So I completely understand that. But to have them both on the same night, we can't figure something out. I wouldn't even mind the UFC moving it to Friday night or something, or having this boxing event. It was supposed to be on September 12th. So again, maybe they're still trying to sort this out. I don't like this. I don't like this unless the UFC is going to go earlier in the day or something and then they do the boxing after, because I don't like the idea of having to have 2 damn TVs up to watch both of them, because I can bet you, or I can tell you this right now. I shouldn't say bet you. I'm just saying that I will not be watching the main event of UFC over Bud Crawford versus Canelo, right? So again, you're kind of killing your own UFC product here, Dana, right? So again, just seems like Dana's checked out. He's trying to check all these boxes, do all these bucket list types of things to where the ego's involved instead of doing what actually makes sense. But at the end of the day, Turkey is going to call the shots. So we will see if this holds up to happen in September. But look, man, lots of great news here from Dana White. And this right here, last but not least, we got an announcement that Shara Magomedov, Shara Bullet, will be taking on Marc-Andre Barriault July 26th in Abu Dhabi. This is a great fight, man. This is a great fight because Marc-Andre basically had his back to the wall, goes out there. His job seemed like it was on the line, brutally finishes Bruno Silva with some elbows up against the fence where he sent Bruno out on a stretcher, dented his head. I mean, it was a brutal finish by Marc-Andre Barriault to where now he's getting Shara Magomedov, who just got checked by Michael Venom Page, who MVP's a welterweight, went up to 185, was able to outstrike Shara Magomedov. This is an interesting fight because what we know about Marc-Andre, doesn't really like to grapple a whole lot. Likes to get into the phone booth, likes to get into the pocket, land some of those good shots in close. And if he can do that, I could see him possibly doing a similar, not as bad as Bruno Silva, but getting into the pocket, making it a dirty type of fight against Shara, because what we've seen against Shara, he likes to play that pretty style of striking from the outside. He's got a kick-heavy approach to leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, to where with the boxing, he tends to struggle. And I think if Marc-Andre can get in the phone booth, I actually could see him pulling off the upset here. But for my early thoughts, I think Shara can pick and poke at him from the outside. And again, we know that, yes, Marc-Andre put on a great performance against Bruno. Bruno had lost how many fights coming into that? And Marc-Andre, he's chinny if you have power and you can land clean on this guy. I think that Shara can outstrike him and outpoint him and win a decision. But let me tell you, if Marc-Andre can get to the clinch, I could see him landing some of those nasty shots, especially with the confidence that he's going to be riding coming in off of that win over Bruno Silva. So exciting time again to be a fight fan, man. Again, you know, big fights, always fun whenever we can get these announcements from the UFC and Dana White. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.